Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Penguin Random House Book and Author Festival. My name is Wendy Bartlett, and I am the Collection Development and Acquisitions Manager at Cuyahoga County Public Library, and I'll be moderating the Big Summer Reads panel today. But first, we need to cover a few housekeeping items. If you've been with us all day, you've seen these already, but if you've only caught a couple of sessions, you'll want to know what's going on, and here we go. The session is being recorded, and it will be available in the virtual environment for 3 months. If you have a question for our speakers, click on the question and answer the Q&A icon. We're going to have some time at the end for your questions. We don't have the chat enabled. If you click on it, it actually says chat disabled, but near the end of the session, we will be sending a Random House PDF. And if you've been to these sessions before, you know they do a beautiful job with their handouts. They're going to have a handout with the cover, title, author, all the information you need. So you can just relax and enjoy, and I'll remind you about that at the end. Live captioning is available. You can either display a subtitle or show the transcript, and you can save the transcript at any time. Note that while the recording will include subtitles, the transcript will not be available on the recording. If you prefer to listen to the audio via phone, click Audio Settings to access a dial-in number. Please join us on Twitter with the hashtag PRH, Penguin Random House, PRH Bookfest. So without further ado, let's meet our fabulous panel for our Big Summer Reads today. Our first Big Summer Read actually has 2 authors. The book is The Personal Librarian from Berkeley by best-selling authors Marie Benedict and Victoria Christopher Murray, both big fan favorites. So it's nothing short of amazing to have the 2 of them together today to tell us all about this amazing story. Also with us today is publishing insider Emma Brodie, here with her first novel, Songs in Ursa Major. It is always such a wonderful opportunity for librarians to introduce a new author to their customers, so we are really excited to have Emma with us today. And actually, we have 2 debut authors with us. Also with us is Miranda Cowley Heller, author of The Paper Palace from Riverhead. Miranda is the former head of drama series at HBO and was instrumental in bringing just a couple little things you may have heard of to the screen, like The Sopranos, 6 Feet Under, and The Wire. We're really happy that Miranda is working in this medium now and delighted to bring you her and The Paper Palace. And last but not least, we are so very happy to have with us the best-selling author of The Devil Wears Prada and When Life Gives You Lululemons, Lauren Weisberger, whose next fabulous Big Summer Read from Random House is titled Where the Grass is Green and the Girls Are Pretty. Lauren, welcome. And if you don't mind, we're going to jump right into questions. So Lauren, welcome. We'll wait for everybody to pop back on the screen here. Here we come. Hello, everybody. Wave. Here we go. We're good. All right, Miss Lauren, let's start with you. I saw this post on your social media page, and I just thought it was delightful and a great way to kick us off today. Lauren has a post that says about her book, spoiler alert, this book is beach safe, which means no politics, no corona, no end of the world drama. Prepare to escape it all, at least for a few hours. And I thought, oh my gosh, what a great way to start us off for Big Summer Reads. So Lauren, I need you to elaborate just a little bit. Yes, you're right. No corona, no politics, but it is a big page turner and kind of ripped from the headlines. So tell us a little bit about the book and about your characters.
Well, thank you for that introduction, Wendy. I love that. As promised, this is definitely a beach read more along the lines of your classic sort of head to the beach, head to the pool. And this one was really particularly fun for me to write. First and foremost, it's a sister's book, and that's something I've been wanting to write forever. Really inspired a lot by my own sister, the only human being on planet Earth who calls it like it is, as painful as it is, as often as it is. She's brutal in the best way humanly possible. And my 2 characters, Peyton and Skye, are the same type of sisters. They're really, really close. They're really, really intense. And I was interested in what happens in this type of sister relationship when a sort of scandal and secret sets in, and all of a sudden it really creates some space between these 2. Without giving too much away, there's definitely something where for the first time in their lives, they find themselves not sharing certain things with one another. So the sisters are the primary backdrop of the book. And with that comes one of them, Peyton, has a teenage daughter, Max. And I really tried to get into exploring the tendency that I won't say we all have, but certainly I struggle with, I find a lot of my friends struggle with, is the helicopter parenting, the how much is too much, the how are we doing in terms of the over raising of these kids, especially in certain towns in America. They're all over. But I was really interested in sort of exploring how that looks. We read these stories in the news all the time, and I was curious what that would look like behind the scenes.
Well, we're glad you took a stab at it, because it's a great book and it's going to be a big one for folks this summer. So Marie and Victoria, Personal Librarian is, of course, historical fiction, and it's based on a fascinating true story and true character. Can you give us an idea about what the book is about and how you came across this character and how you developed it?
Yeah, well, this is Marie.
I'm going to take a stab at this one first. We have kind of a tag team thing going on here. I mean, most people, of course, are familiar with the 19th and 20th century industrialist and financier J.P. Morgan, but fewer people probably know that he actually built a stunning personal library in New York City to house his priceless collection of rare manuscripts, and that he hired a woman to run it. Her name was Belle DaCosta Green, and during the almost 4 decades that she ran this unbelievably gorgeous library, an important library, she became probably the most successful career woman of her day. She became one of the most important people in the art world, but she was only able to do it by hiding her true identity. She was actually African American. And she was coming into this position of power at a time in American history when segregation and the Jim Crow laws really ruled the land. She probably wouldn't have even been allowed in this library, let alone run it and becoming one of the foremost art experts really in the world. So, once we delved into her story, it was one we really felt was important on so many levels. I actually kind of first learned about Belle when I was in the Morgan Library itself. In a different life earlier on, I was actually a commercial litigator in New York City for well over a decade. And I didn't love it, much like Victoria had a whole other career before she was a writer too. And I spent a lot of my time, it's not a lot of my time, when I could, escaping from the law in the wonderful museums and libraries of New York City, the Morgan Library in particular. And I was actually there hiding out, I confess, one day for my job. And I happened to talk to a docent there who was incredibly knowledgeable about Belle and the role she really played in creating that institution and its collection. And then, of course, when I went down the rabbit hole of research, Victoria and I, we found that she was so much more magnificent than we could have ever imagined, and her life and her contributions and her legacy so much more important that we really had to tell her story. So that's kind of how we found her.
It's quite a story. So thank you for that. I was wondering how this all came about. So it's kind of great that you discovered it in a library too. The librarians in our audience won't hate that, right? Emma, my next question's for you. Your book is also historical fiction, although I hate to say that because it starts in 1969 and I was very much alive in 1969, and I hate to call anything like that historical fiction, but in fact, it actually really is. So tell our audience tuning in today what was so special about that time, and a little bit about who Jane and Jesse may have been based on or influenced by, in case they may not have that frame of reference.
No problem. So this book completely exploded for me when I discovered in a sort of off-the-cuff reference in Carly Simon's memoir that James Taylor had actually dated Joni Mitchell before he dated Carly. We're so entitled to our celebrities. We want to know everything about them. And I immediately set out to find out everything about this relationship. And to be honest, there's nothing out there.
Wow.
Yeah, it's almost, they mention it openly, like it's not a secret between James and Joni that they dated, but it's just something that's kind of been lost to time because the relationship was 50 years ago. So there are these two artifacts that still exist from the relationship, and it's the album Blue by Joni. And there are certain songs on JT's, I think it's his third album, Mudslide Slim and the Blue Horizon, that are written about Joni. You Can Close Your Eyes is the one that really sort of opened my eyes, because he's sung that with every single collaborator under the sun. Stephen Colbert, obviously Carly, Carole King, and he wheeled it out on the Carousel tour. And so from that point, I just was completely obsessed. I listened to these albums all the time, and basically half suggested from their own life stories, and then also suggested from the music itself, this plot and this alternate reality started to emerge in my own mind that kind of took on its own life. And of course, it was based in the era of these two albums. So at that point, I also became obsessed with all these other albums that had come out around the same time. And I think it's really fascinating that there are these moments in history where genius kind of converges, right? Like we have the expat writers, Fitzgerald and Hemingway. We have the Renaissance, a great example. And I think that Laurel Canyon in 1970 and 1971 is another example of all of these seminal albums coming out one after the other. And they're all still completely relevant. We all still listen to them. And the idea that the inspiration for these albums could have been lost to time. So there's still current songs that have application to our lives, but the actual inspiration is forgotten. I just absolutely loved this idea. So I set out to write a story and to kind of explore the world for myself. And that is how it happened.
No, that is fantastic, Emma. Thank you. And the music just infuses this book. It's amazing. So Miranda, one of the things I loved about The Paper Palace was how vivid Ellie's memories are in this book. I mean, the scenes just leap from the page. We go back to different time periods in her life, but it's really immediate. It might be a little challenging to do this without giving anything away, but can you tell folks what the role of sort of personal history and memory plays in the decision-making that Ellie has to make in this book?
I'll try.
Okay.
So at the center of the novel is Elle, and it's a story of a woman who has to make an impossible decision, life-changing decision, in a single summer day. And the novel is written in two time frames. So it's 24 hours and 50 years. And they ultimately collide, those two periods, by the end. And Elle has to choose between the life that she's made with her deeply loved, amazing husband, Peter, and a chance to have the life she always imagined she was meant to have with her childhood love and her best friend, Jonas. And so the 50 years allow us to understand what brought Elle to this precipice that she's teetering on today. I mean, I think our lives are made up of a million moments, and a handful of those moments are what stick with us. And they define us, and they ground us, and they unnerve us or make us choose the wrong guy or the right guy. And it doesn't even matter if they're accurate. It doesn't matter if your sister says, actually, that's not what happened, because it's what you remember, and it's what shaped you, what curveballed you, and made you who you are. So in the book, sort of bit by bit, in these small pieces from the past, these small memories, but told in real time, we piece together kind of who Elle is, and more importantly, why she is the way she is. And you learn the legacies of her childhood that like derailed her, or her embarrassments, her moments of true joy, and very importantly, a single act in her teens that changed the course of everything and can never be undone. So by the end of the novel, her past literally catches up with her. And so, yeah, that's what I wanted to kind of look at.
Excellent. And you bring it together really, really well.
Thank you.
Which is quite a feat. It's because it's quite a story. So one of the themes, and a couple of you have touched on this already, and I'm just going to quickly stop and say this to the librarians because this would be super cool. And I thought this as I was reading and preparing. It would be so neat to do a series of book discussions with all 4 of these books, because all 4 of these books deal with family, love, history, or personal history. There's all kinds of common themes, and it would be fascinating to do that. Just so you're welcome. There's your summer. You can plan that. Okay, so anyway, Emma, let's talk about family a little bit. In Songs of Ursa Major, Jane has a wonderful family at home. But as the story progresses, what really caught my eye was that the people in the band, the music scene, one of the things that made me super nostalgic, because I remember this so well, were the writers for Rolling Stone and some of these other magazines, and how incredibly important they were in those relationships. So Jane kind of has this family of music people. As she encounters them, does she change as a character? How does that look for her?
I love this question. One of the things that I love about this book so much is Jane's family. Like, the rock star stuff is so flashy, but honestly, like, the real fantasy is, you know, this matriarchal clan where they all, like, they own a house together and they help each other raise their babies, and there's always childcare. Like, it's just this, like, very supportive environment. So Jane grows up as the baby of this 7 generations, the Quinns, these women that live on this island off the coast of Massachusetts, and they're fiercely independent. They eschew marriage, and she is sort of imbued and entitled to her own independence and autonomy. So part of what happens is when she enters the music world and is, you know, charting her course, she has to step off the island and into the world of, you know, institutional sexism and ageism and all of these different things. And one of the things that happens is, because she has this legacy of independence and a very strong black and white view of, like, how things should be and what she deserves, she alienates people. And she also draws people to her. So I think one of the things that happens over the course of the book is that Jane herself gets more moderate and tempered. Like, she has lots of ups and downs. And by the end of the book, her thinking is a lot less black and white. And that's in part due to these writers that she interacts with. I think she kind of pulls people in from the fringes. So part of it is this album, Songs in Ursa Major, that she writes, her seminal album, that basically everyone who listens to it goes on a journey and identifies with. And part of what happens is that people who sort of see themselves as outsiders within the music industry, so, you know, her sound engineer who's quietly gay and hasn't come out yet, and these writers who are, there's one who's a woman who's trying to break into, like, the all-male music journalism world. And then there's another guy who's a local journalist on the island where Jane grows up. So he's literally trying to break in from the island as well. They gravitate towards Jane and they help raise her voice up because they see themselves reflected in her. And so I think it's a combination of Jane, like, trusting these people, embracing them, and then, you know, becoming more moderate in herself as their relationships progress. You know, she's still really sterling in terms of, like, what she wants by the end of it. I don't think that really changes, but I do think she is able to be more measured in her approach and sort of take things a little bit more as they come, because she's been influenced by these people. I love this question.
No, that's a great answer, because she definitely draws people to her, and I saw that right away, but I was curious to know what you thought about how it changed her. That's a great answer. Victoria and Marie, Belle's family, oh my, in The Personal Librarian, is really, really important. Tell our audience about Belle's father, Charles, right? And Mama, and how her family influenced who she became. I think it's just so formational for her and her story.
Yeah, and you know what's so interesting? Her father was Richard T. Greener.
Richard, thank you.
And, yeah, Richard T. Greener. And in the African-American community, we know his name. We never knew her name. He was the first African-American to graduate from Harvard. And then he went on to become the dean of Howard Law School and do a lot of other things. One of the things we did not know about him was that he was a civil rights advocate. He fought alongside Frederick Douglass and everything, and they were really supporting the Civil Rights Act of 1875 that I wasn't very aware of until I met Marie and we started talking about this. And but the Supreme Court overturned that. And that became the big event for Belle's family, because her mother, who was in the fight as well before, said, nope, it's never going to be equal for us. And we've been given this gift of fair skin. So let us live one life. And her father said, that's never going to happen on my watch. And Belle was right at such a formative age when that happened, at the age of 16. And so she was old enough, perhaps, to have chosen which way to go. But she went with her mother, who took all the children. And her family never, her parents never divorced, but they lived totally separate lives. And one of the things that Marie and I were able to explore, because that's all we know, that's the only, those are the only facts we know, was what would that have been like for Belle, who we imagine was probably one of the favorite children, because she had the same interest as her father. And so she went with her mother, but longed for her father. And so it's such an interesting fact, because as I said, everyone knows Richard T. Greener, and he was such a big voice during that time. But she went the other way, but still had his influence.
Absolutely had his influence. And it's just an incredible story. So it's just such a gift that you two were able to bring this to us. It's an amazing story for the whole family. Miranda, Elle's mother in The Paper Palace, she's quite something. And her mother, Nanette, is quite something. There's some big family history there that kind of shaped their personalities, particularly Elle's mother, I think. Can you talk a little bit about the women in Elle's family and how they influenced her ideas about family and children and love?
It's a great question. And certainly, well, I think the actual answer is how haven't they?
Yeah.
The women in The Paper Palace are just forces of nature in their different ways. And so Elle has grown up in this sort of dysfunctional matriarchy. These are all women who have endured pretty dark things in their past and come out the other way in different ways. And particularly her mother, Wallace, who's an enormous pain in the ass, and who I really, who I really adore.
I was just going to say, she's also kind of a funny pain in the ass, let's be honest.
Really funny. I don't know where that comes from, honestly. It makes me laugh. But yeah, so who is Elle in relation to that? And I think children, as we all know, often shape themselves, in opposition to what they observe from their parents or from the generations before that, or not. And so that really interested me. I wanted to examine the sort of complexities of mother and daughter relationships, but also of sisters, grandparents, and children, so these sisters navigating their parents' divorce, their parents' multiple marriages, but also of the way, like the choices I was saying earlier, of like even our grandparents. So in Nanette, her grandmother, for example, not all our parents, can, live on in us. It's almost like a trickle down economics. Trickle down emotional economics.
Yeah, no, that's actually a good description. Yes.
And so it's sort of, can you break that cycle of multi-generational abuse? Can you ever bury the traumas of your past? Can you, outlive your secrets? And it kind of asks through these women, is Elle running to something or away from something?
Yep, absolutely. And really, I think we see it in terms of how Elle is with her kids,
exactly.
And how redemptive she is with those kids, which is pretty cool. So thank you. Lauren, in Where the Grass is Green and the Girls Are Pretty, the sisters turn to each other instinctively, and you touched on this a little bit before, but at the same time, there's a, again, don't want to give anything away here, but they sort of hesitate to come clean. They both kind of have something they don't quite want to share with the other one. What makes a good sister relationship different from a good best friend relationship? Because I think you get close to that in this book.
That is an interesting issue. It's one that I think about a lot. And personally, I think there's a lot of overlap with a great sister relationship. She is your best friend, but it goes beyond that. I mean, I think of a sister or a sibling relationship, really, they're your arguably only lifelong witness, hopefully, if you're lucky. You know, friends can come and go, even spouses can come and go, but a sibling is there from day one. And there's something in that that's just so remarkable. I feel it tremendously with my sister. We have our own shorthand, our own language. Like I said before, some of it brutal, but there's no one in my life and on the planet who can sort of communicate in that way and understand. We just have like an understanding for one another. And I really wanted to create that again with Peyton and Skye. Like you said, they're very different people. I think
very.
Sisters are extremely different. And Peyton is a household name. She's a morning anchor of a well-known morning news show. And her sister sort of, you know, took a different path. I think that's kind of a common theme in real life also, especially for the same gender siblings. They sort of define themselves through their relationship with their other. But Skye took a different path, and she was much more interested in teaching and volunteer work, work abroad, nonprofits. And yet she found herself in a world that's sort of very similar to Peyton's. Peyton is in the city. She's in exactly the kind of world you would expect a famous morning anchor would live, with all of the trappings of that, with the lifestyle that goes along with that. But oddly, Skye has found herself sort of unwittingly in a similar world. She's in a very affluent suburb of New York City. She moved there why everybody moves to these very affluent suburbs of New York City or Atlanta or Los Angeles or Chicago, for the schools. And the schools are the very, very best, but with the very, very, very best public schools comes the very, very, very craziest parents, and they're all there. And that's one of the things that I think Skye struggles with the most in this book. And it's certainly, again, without giving too much away, one of the issues that Peyton struggles with.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're in a place where it's not at all unusual for toddlers to have private lacrosse coaches, and for, you know, tweens to go on $20,000 volunteer opportunities in the summertime, and high schoolers have every manner of college advisor, let's put it that way, possible. I was interested in where the line is. I think when somebody asks, we could ask anyone here, and I'm sure we would all agree that if you try to write a check and buy your kid's way into college, you're doing something wrong. But where's the line with that? And I was very interested to sort of explore via these two sisters who both struggle with that in their own ways. Where is the line? What is legally allowed? What's morally and ethically allowed? What is any of this actually serving our children? So
yeah, and I think what is so cool is you do a good job of, the reader starts out thinking, well, this is an open and shut question. That why would you even ask me that question? And you don't think it's quite so clear by the time you get done with the sisters sort of going back and forth. So I think that's really great. And they're two great sisters. I loved the sisters in your book. One of the other big themes in all of the books we've got going for us on our panel today is love, which of course you have to have in a big summer read. It's not allowed to be a big summer read if there's not love. So Miranda, I'm going to come back to you. One of the central questions in the Paper Palace, and you touched on this a minute ago, are all kinds of love equal? Are all kinds of love desirable? You've got passionate first love with Jonas. You've got this wonderful relationship with Peter, the husband. It's a question a lot of people wrestle with. Sometimes people really struggle to forget that first love. You use the word kryptonite to describe it in one part of the book, and I thought, ooh, that landed a little close to home. But yes, kryptonite is exactly what that feels like. So you make a strong case for both. Tell us what inspired you to write about that tension between those two kinds of love.
Well, first of all, I'm really glad that you found them equally compelling, or that it,
Oh, very much so.
That's really important to me in terms of, sort of what I was going for and what interested me. The story only makes sense if they're equals.
Mm.
If it's weighted towards one or the other, then we're done at the beginning. And I mean, sort of ish. And the choice that Elle has to make is between a great, great love and a great, great love. So there's no bad choice. And that means there's no good choice. And so that the impossibility of that, I guess, is what I wanted to really get into and explore. I mean, in all of its iterations, and moral and otherwise, but I also think it's a sort of universal dilemma in whatever way, choosing between one kind of happiness and another kind of happiness. But this one sort of in the end, I think, distills down to a question a lot of us struggle with, which is, or we probably all do, which is, who do I want to be in the end? How do I want to behave? How do I want to act? What do I want to be true to? What parts of myself do I want to be true to? And then in that balance, how important is it to fulfill your own dreams? How do you weigh your own needs against the needs of all the other people around you? And I sort of asked myself, if you could untether yourself from that sort of tug of war between desire and dignity, or your own moral or society's moral compass, what would you do then? What choice would you make? Would you make the same? Anyway, and I think so you're in a bubble. Would you blow up your life? Would you sacrifice the greatest love you've ever felt and that passion for a more stable, sort of honest, enduring love that you've had and you've spent your life building? And so is there a right answer between them? I don't know. And that's kind of the thing that really interests me. I think there's just sort of the push me pull you of two people, and being stuck on this tightrope between two, tall buildings, teetering in the middle, and you're like, I don't know which way, I literally don't know which way to go, but if I go neither direction, I'm just gonna fall.
Right, so, right. I'm going to be stuck forever. And I think what is compelling about the timing of this book, following I know we're not supposed to talk about COVID per Lauren's post, but what's compelling about the timing of this book is, with the pandemic, I think it brings that feeling of, you've got one shot at your life.
Yeah. Right.
So which one of these great loves are you going to choose? And I think it adds an impetus to this novel that might not have been there had it been written 3 years ago. So the timing's pretty cool. Lauren, your book is shot through with love. There are 2 incredible marriages in your book. Was it hard for you? Your characters are created so lovingly, and I got all choked up when they ran into marital problems. Was it hard for you as a writer to sort of put these people in that situation, because they're incredibly real, relatable characters, and they go through some really tough stuff?
They do, and I appreciate your saying that. This was the book where I finally got tired about. I got tired of writing the bad guy, the terrible husband, the cheating boyfriend, the cad. I've done that before, and it's fun. But I was really excited to kind of have 2 women in hard-won, hard-earned, healthy, functioning relationships that, of course, are not perfect, because no relationships are. And it was interesting, writing this, getting to see what it was, what some of the issues that they're facing. Now it's, past the initial glow of a new marriage, past the honeymoon phase, past the brand new children, when everything's sort of settled, and I feel like there's that time in that part of a marriage or a long relationship, where in the beginning there's so much newness and so much happening, and the next step and the next step, you're always sort of looking forward, and then all of a sudden there's this realization of you are where you are, and it's a sort of inward looking. I wanted both Peyton and Sky to see that. And I wanted them to see it and experience it with wonderful men in their own way, flawed. Everybody is, all the characters are, all the humans are. But that was a really nice change of pace for me. And, you know, again, like, without revealing too much, there's one of the secret that's at the crux of this book that really sort of pulls apart the sisters, and it ripples out like an effect across this whole family. The two sisters, their two husbands, their children, their mother, the whole sort of family unit, this trickles and affects all of them. And what I thought was, what I was really trying to do with that, it was just a very, I liked the idea that one particular thing that you wouldn't necessarily expect, one tiny little decision, one tiny moment in time, could affect so many different people unexpectedly. And that's really what I tried to do here.
Yeah, and you succeeded. And I think the marriages they work really well because the husbands are great, but they're not fake great. They're believably great guys. They're very real. So I think that really comes off great. Marie and Victoria, there's a really touching, incredible love story in The Personal Librarian, which I really liked. So this is going to be hard to do without giving too much away. So tiptoe through this, but can you tell us about the relationship between Bernard and Belle?
Yeah, I'm going to take most of this one.
Okay.
When Belle meets Bernard Berenson, she meets him in her capacity as the personal librarian for the Morgan Library, at a time when he has really risen up himself to become the world's, I'm hoping that's not mine, the world's foremost expert in Renaissance art. You know, up until just something I really didn't realize at this point in time, the Renaissance sort of field, whether it's books, which they were really focused on, but also artwork, sculpture, et cetera, had really kind of faded from memory. And he's really the key figure in bringing that to the forefront and making people appreciate it really for what it was once again, which of course is very entrancing to Belle. And they connect on so many levels. But like Belle, there's so much more to Bernard than meets the eye. Like Belle, he has a secret of his own, which I will not name. And to some extent, like Belle, he's masquerading in this elite world where they both operate. You know, the world of art collectors, buyers, museums is a very rarefied community of bright, extremely wealthy people, and it's a very white world. And so this sort of kind of suspected dual hidden identities really connects them in unique ways. You know, they of course share this passion for art and culture, and they operate in this world where even today we would recognize most of the people that are in their circles. It's the Morgans and the Rockefellers and famous dancers and artists. I mean, they're really in the hub of it all, but they can only be authentic with one another to some extent. Right. And even then, not 100%. But it's also kind of through this relationship we wanted to explore. I mean, they really were each other's great loves of their lives, and they kept in touch their whole lives. But we also kind of wanted to explore through this relationship the sacrifices they each had to make to be part of that elite world, both personally and as a couple, with the kinds of things they had to give up and the pain that they had to endure through these sacrifices. And as they move forward in their lives, together and apart, what that looks like as a result of the secrets that they choose to keep, and as a result of the sort of identities that they choose to that they choose to harbor. It's almost like there was a moment in the Morgan Library and then beyond when they looked across the room and they recognized one another.
Yeah.
You know, they recognized that deep abiding secret that the other holds, and they recognize that it's really only through each other that they can be seen, truly seen. And yet society has a lot of barriers and hurdles for them to overcome or not.
Right. It's an incredible connection, but it's very bittersweet.
And we don't think that's their only we don't think that's the only connection. Even though Bernard was Belle's great love, there's always been a question as to whether or not Belle and JP Morgan ever had anything going on. There was only one time she was asked that question. And, you know, she always had these quips and one-liners. And when they asked, had anything ever happened between her and JP Morgan, her response was, "We tried."
What a great answer.
We have no idea what that
means.
Yes, but Marie and I kind of figured it out and put a little bit in the story. But
I love it.
But they also had a great relationship, and I think they could have been each other's great love if she wasn't hiding a secret that we don't know whether or not he ever knew.
Right. That's right. That's right. We don't really, there's a lot of unanswered questions, which makes the book really compelling in so many ways. Emma, we're going to wrap up this part of our questions with you. We know a lot about Jane in this book, and there's a lot about love in this book. Tell us about this relationship with Jane, and just tell us about Jessie. Tell us what's love like from Jessie's point of view. Okay.
Well, this is such a good question. Jane, so just to make sure we all have like a common vocabulary for this, my book starts out at a music festival. My universe doesn't have Woodstock or Newport Folk Fest. It has the Baleen Island Folk Fest, which is this like super gorgeous clay cliffside, very atmospheric island music festival that people troop out off the coast of Massachusetts every year to go see. So one year, Jesse Reed, who's like tall, handsome, dark hair, blue eyes, great at guitar, he's the headliner and he doesn't show up. So out of the blue, this local band, the Breakers, are shoved onto the main stage at the last minute, and they completely steal the show by singing one of Jesse's songs. So the lead singer is Jane Quinn. She's our heroine and my character. And from there, a bunch of things happen in very quick succession that lead her and Jesse to interact. One of the things, so I think there are basically three things that connect Jane and Jesse. One is the island, Baleen Island. One is music, and the other is the loss of their mothers. So basically, Baleen Island is my sort of fake Martha's Vineyard, to use some shorthand. Jesse is rich. He owns a house there that he summers in. Jane is a townie and she works 3 jobs. Money is very front of mind for her. They're both very young. This is a first love story. So Jane's 19, but is sort of worldly. And Jesse's 22, and we don't know a lot about him. He's quiet and thoughtful and this really great musician. So the reason he wasn't able to perform at this folk fest was because he crashed his motorcycle and ends up convalescing in his family's summer home on the island. So as the story progresses, it's really a small town romance that plays itself out over a national stage. And I think, the second area where they connect their music, they're both really talented. And part of what happens thematically throughout the book is that they're creating music and writing music all the time and performing, and that's a huge part of the story. But I think it also acts as a metaphor for their love, because when you first fall in love, it feels like you're a rock star to another person. It feels like you could sing all the time.
Right.
So
Yeah.
There's like a very literal aspect of it that sort of plays out that way. And then there's this third sort of undercurrent, which is that Jane and Jesse both have lost their mothers, and they're both kind of lying. They're both lying to each other about certain facets of that. And a lot of why they're drawn to each other is this mother loss. And it takes on different weights with both of them. But I think, to your question, from Jesse's perspective, there are a few things about Jane. One is that she is not dependent on him in any way. While Jesse's absence kind of paves the way for Jane's career to take off, he's not directly responsible for her getting talent scouted. They actually do ultimately share an A&R man, which is a manager back in 70s speak. But he's not in any way directly responsible for her fame or her success or her moving forward, at least not to start out. So she isn't cloying, like there's nothing that she wants from him, and that's huge. The other piece is that she has this amazing family, and Jesse's all alone in this house with no one to look after him. So he sort of gets subsumed into the Quinns, and I think that fills this void. And then there's another aspect, which is that Jesse lost his mom to cancer. And so there's an aspect of him wanting to take care of Jane, who's the one person who doesn't want anything from him, because he couldn't take care of his own mother or do anything to get in the way of her death. So I think he's subconsciously chasing that through much of the novel, and then ultimately is able to sort of articulate it by the end. But I think for him, Jane is just this light who's inspiring and also just like adds meaning to his life. Like essentially he says a few times, like, if you weren't here, like none of this would matter to me. Whereas Jane has a lot more to prove of herself. And I think that's partly class and gender, but also partly because of her own journey with her own mother and the legacy that loss left.
Yes, and just her own personality. She's just
Yeah.
kind of that kind of a person who she's going to get out there and prove what she needs to prove. So authors, we have done a beautiful job. We've got 3 minutes left. So we do have a couple questions from our audience. And audience, I just want to say this really quickly. The PDF has been posted. I saw it go up in the chat because someone asked about the publication date for Paper Palace. But Miranda, go ahead and tell us if you know right off the top of your head. When's the book come out?
July 6th.
July 6th.
Weirdly,
3 days.
Yeah.
Okay. Go figure. Go figure. Lauren's, when does yours come out?
Let me unmute there. We are coming up shortly, May 18th.
Very good. Emma?
6/22, which is actually the 50th anniversary of the Blue Album. So,
Dude, did
and
you do
my
that on
editor's
purpose?
birthday. Yeah.
Oh my God, that's awesome. That's really cool. Nice. Marie and Victoria, what's our publication date?
June 29th.
June 29th. All right, we're getting there. Well, it's a summer full of beautiful, beautiful books. Friends, so grateful for you being here today. Really, truly tremendous reads. I feel so privileged that I got a sneak peek at all of them. They were really, really great reads. Our customers are going to love them. So nice that we have 2 debut authors to offer up, as well as fabulous fan favorites, we like to call them at the library. So they're going to be delighted to see those books up there. So thank you so much for joining us. Librarians, thank you for joining us. And we will see you. Oh, I have to tell you about the next panel. Don't go anywhere. Wait. I have to tell you to hang in there, because at our next panel is to remind you also, the session will be archived and available soon in the live sessions area. Sounds dangerous. Please remember to save the transcript now if you want. Our final session is next. Don't miss the conversation with poet Jasmine Manz and playwright Tiara Alegria Hyudis. Thanks, everybody. Happy reading. Have a great summer. Authors, thank you so much. Take care. Good luck with your books.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.